Alright, what's up, yins guys? Time for another video. And I promised I was going to do this video when I was talking about other particular racial issues, and I was supposed to do it right after. I never did. I thought about going live with this shit, but I need videos to edit and then repost in case the signal goes bad or something. I don't think I'm good enough in anything as far as doing anything live, except if very seldom I want to send message to particular people who I know are listening on any platform I'm on. But anyway, I like to bash all these far left kids. Some of them even could be in their 30s or even 40s or whatever, but all over YouTube and other places that think they know it all. And I meant to talk about this, about music, and I'm going to make reference to, in fact, a file that I recorded off of the FM radio when Jim Quinn was back on the radio. It's about racial music, and this is to talk about how things are up to now. You young kids there that think you know it all, or even ones that know me of any age, how things evolved, if you will, and not to try to bash anybody all the time, but these kids, leftist kids and yuppie white kids, even in my town and other places, that are playing the rap music, the gangsta music, trying to announce to the people they're driving by, like that the gangsters got their back, or they're in with the gangsters. Or some of them might be doing like some of us did with heavy metal. They're playing maybe Danzig in their car loud, just coping, with stuff. I mean, try not to judge here, but these kids that are playing that stuff in the car, I particularly think rap music was better in the 80s, but I'm making some references to 80s rap music, but I'm more like talking about here what I want to talk about, not to tell my life story, up until how you got Spotify and damn iTunes and all that shit, and different MP3 players that evolved over the past few years. I'm going further back here, when my long hair was a little bit less gray, and in matter of fact, as far as politics, I'll bring up Styx Hexenhammer 666, like younger than me. I may have I'm like 52 already, like he's all younger, but I share his videos about his politics, but I'm different, and I have different kind of beliefs as far as occultist and religious beliefs, and I come from when I got older, the factory working environments that influences everything I do and say on YouTube. And the reason why I ramble about that, I'm getting to the point here, is remember when Jim Quinn used to be on FM radio when I was working in a particular factory job for many years, back when I was walking around with a cocky look on my face, my hair being less grayer, and when a lot of my haters were giving me dirty looks before there was any internet, because I had a factory job that was out of minimum wage, and walking around in restaurants and that, buying tapes and CDs. But anyway, bringing this into relevance here without rambling, try to make my point that these kids think they know shit and they don't. Okay, record albums, these things called record albums, were still back around in my day, and I don't want to use that YouTube cliche, link in the description and all that crap, like and subscribe, link in description. I almost want to use the cliche link in description to tell you I got a clip that I recorded off of FM radio when my one factory job years ago went completely. I was going back to college. Jim Quinn was still on FM radio, right? And I recorded this onto a computer file, and I put it on YouTube. So not to use link in description cliche. That link in the description cliche for YouTube, I never use that. Do that shit. It's so cliche, but I'll invite you to do it. And it can be a reference file for what I'm talking about. So I'm putting Jim Quinn's, what I heard off of Jim Quinn, not like I was letting him do my talking, but he summed everything up. And since he was a DJ before he became the other Rush Limbaugh, he was a Pittsburgh DJ, right? and we were listening to the radio. We had things called records and tapes and boom boxes. We had people, long hair like me, some of them, you had the, what do you call it, you had boy bands, but then you also had bands like Motley Crue. You had maybe some Metallica, tough guy, long-haired teenager music, rebellious music, but then you had groups like glam rock, Bon Jovi, Poison. Some of them wore a little makeup, not to act gay, but makeup being so we show better on TV anyway. But anyway, this is back in our grandparents' day, and I'll say in parentheses here, before you guys had your Spotify, MP3 players, and all that, we had records and tapes and boom boxes, and I was a teenager and everything, different kind of music. But when I listened to, I got old enough to work in a factory at the time in my 20s, and Jim Quinn was still on the radio, being the other Rush Limbaugh. So this was stuff, I'm making reference to him, right? But all right, up until you had all that stuff, Spotify, MP3 players, back even before my day, our grandparents' day, you had these things called records. Cassette tapes were a big deal. CDs didn't come out really to us until, they didn't become real big until like the early 80s. I remember they were real expensive, and everything else. But before that, this isn't just Jim Quinn talking, I'm saying this from memory. But he brought up a lot of things worth looking up. Okay, I'm trying not to ramble, but I'm not to tell you my life story, but okay, in my day, records and tapes were a big deal in the 80s, right? And we had places like National Record Mart, Record Outlet, and a bunch of names you can probably name. And I just looked up a place called Sam Goody. I'm pretty sure Google said they still are alive and well, but they only have 2 stores in the whole country, right? But yes, yeah, we're talking about days when MTV came out, right? Yes, and don't fall out of your chair here, guys. What? You better hold on to your chair for this, you younger kids. Back in my day, MTV and VH1, are you ready for this? They actually played music and music videos, right? They weren't like the reality show channels like VH1 is now. They are reality show channel. VH1 is saying all this others, playing all this other stuff. And I call it MTV, the ridiculousness channel, because they marathon ridiculousness, and me and my partner loved that show. But any other time, reality shows and other goofy shit, you know what I mean, too. But then History Channel, a little off the subject, History Channel used to play actual history when it come out. Now it's the Ancient Aliens channel. Yeah, the History Channel is the Ancient Aliens channel. But anyway, way before my teenage days, Record Outlet, Sam Goody, Rational, Record Mart, records and CDs, people listen to heavy metal, rap music. I think rap music was better in the 80s, 1980s, in my opinion. Fat Boys, Run DMC, Nucleus, and all them. But okay, you still with me so far? Taking it further back, Jim Quinn brought this back. Before any of them stores I was talking about, back when I was a teenager, they didn't have all that. They had records, right? And there was times they even had, 78s. My mother was, I believe, played Neil Young all the time in a 45 Heart of Gold in a 45 RPM. The record albums, those black discs, little ones that played only one song and one on the other side, they were around for a while in the 1980s, called 45 RPMs, and then But anyway, back even before that, our grandparents' day, right? You didn't have any of them record stores, and you sure shit didn't have Spotify or iTunes or these MP3 phones or even these phones, even to say the shit on these phones, right? They had music stores. The music stores, right? They sold trumpets, pianos. Well, you got a separate stores for pianos, but pianos, guitars, violins, saxophones. They sold trumpets, and I think you could buy a harmonica or a banjo there, right? And but they were music stores. But they also sold records. You didn't have record stores yet. And then they had listening booths. Kids would go in there to listen to a record if you wanted to buy it or not. And this comes into play where Dick Clark and American Bandstand come around, with me so far. I'm saying this from memory, not to ramble, trying to make it too long, organize the thoughts, or whatever the hell. But anyway, during those times, that's what you had, music stores. They were selling records like that. So You know, this was the old people would know this, but any of you young kids who were like, didn't know who the hell Dick Clark was or whatever, but Dick Clark had another, I wouldn't say it's his rival, somebody at the same time named Alan Freed that should have been in the same position as Dick Clark. He didn't have to have his life ruined, and he didn't have to die of cirrhosis of the liver or whatever. But anyway, bear with me. There's, I think, a neighbor across the street started mowing the grass. Hopefully this ain't too distracting in the background. I might just do the video over, do another take on the video. But anyway, so music back in the day that I'm taking you to, and what Jim Quinn took me to when I listened to that little audio clip that's available for you guys to listen to. Okay, his quote, and I'm not letting him do my talking for me, for according to him and other people, music was really boring. You know, there was crying in your beer country music, and the last teardrop falls, you know, they called it crying in your beer music, crying in your whiskey music. And they had some music, I think Jim Quinn brought up K-Star, and then you had old records that you probably see now and that still survive in covered with dust in people's basements or in Goodwill, Raycon of singers and stuff. Anyway, music was really boring. It sucked. And meanwhile, if you're with me so far in this video here, it gets better. DJs, there was a thing where, yes, there was some racism, right? And there was people, I think both black and white, they were, you were able to go to a DJ, the radio station, and put a record and slip them a few bucks and get them to play a record. And hopefully people like it. You could get known, right? And this is how some of these black musicians become popular. Jim Quinn, and also to back it up, maybe laying in a basement of dust, to collecting dust in people's basement and Goodwill stores, and maybe antique dealers like maybe eBay or stuff. You had record labels like Chess and Checker, earlier black artists. You might be able to go on eBay right now somewhere and get maybe record albums from the record label Chess and Checker, if you're a collector, I don't know. But how that came on, oh, the Ink Spots, the Temptations, everybody, you know, good R&B. Anyway, Alan Freed before Dick Clark. Yeah, Dick Clark was on the scene, a guy named Alan Freed. He realized kids were listening to buying black music and R&B music. And meanwhile, guy in the game that, okay, I told you a lot of music kind of sucked. Mitch Miller, there was a guy really like boring country music back in the day. His albums now you can probably find them collecting dust in people's basements. Mitch Miller, I forget what record label he had, but he was real mad. He was wondering why nobody was buying his records, and people started buying black music, like the old time R&B, like where rock and roll started coming into the scene. Okay, I'm saying this from memory, trying to organize my thoughts based using Jim Quinn, that recording that I took of him, which was, I regard as epic. Whether you like Jim Quinn's politics, irrelevant. I'm putting in with my memory what I heard from him, and slipping in here the days when I was a teenager and trying to take it back to grandparents' day and what I know. And I'll even make a funny reference. Yeah, I remember these things called 8-track tapes. Some of them may collecting dust in your grandparents' basement. But anyway, yeah, so Mitch Miller was pissed off, in my own words, because less people were buying his country records. And I still, in my head, where Jim Quinn was talking about it, right? He says, yeah, Mitch Miller, you remember him? The Yellow Rose of Texas. He got real pissed off, nobody buying his records, right? And he did some investigating his own. And he found out these kids were playing the black music. They were trying to get on the scene. And meanwhile, a lot of DJs were doing it, taking a little money under the table, play a tune. And Jim Quinn's quote, which I'm saying in memory too, he made an argument in here that, yeah, it's hard, you can't do that shit now, but you can actually have a record, theoretically, you, me, or anybody, and bribe a DJ to play it. But no matter how many times you pay a DJ to play it, you could be pissing the audience off. Maybe sometimes it won't work, and maybe some of them did. But Thus, this did work with a lot of people. So Mitch Miller getting pissed off, not being repetitive. He found out that DJs were taking these payments, and the DJs didn't think they were doing anything wrong. How would they? So Mitch Miller, being a shit starter and being vengeful and spiteful and jealous as he was, he calls the IRS, and there was some big government, they call it a payola scandal or whatever. I think you could look it up somewhere on the news to find all the details and maybe correct me some things I'm wrong. But yeah, Mitch Miller got pissed off. Government got involved, and so a lot of DJs were getting investigated by the IRS. So a guy named Alan Freed and Dick Clark were both hot acts. And Alan Freed, he coined the name rock and roll. And people said, you can't call the music rock and roll. He was a DJ. All the kids like him, famous DJ. He should have been in Dick Clark's place, or he and Dick Clark should have both been in the same place. Alan Freed didn't have to have his life ruined, but that happened. They had to throw somebody to the wolves. And the way that happened was weed eater across the street, the guy doing a weed eater across the street. Bear with me, I hope it ain't too distracting, okay? So what happened, how Dick Clark survived all of this and became the man, and even it led to the thing called American Bandstand, and New Year's Rockin' Eve did happen. Alan Freed died of cirrhosis of the liver, depressed, he got fired, and totally, life ruined and all that. But he invented the term rock and roll. Okay, and when he was on the scene and was popular and did this, before all that scandal about taking money under the table, all that money being taken under the table by DJs, before that turned into a big, gigantic controversy scandal, he was real popular, and he called the music rock and roll. And people told him, oh, you can't call the music rock and roll because that was the black term, okay, what black people used for getting it on in the bedroom, and you want to make kids, and doing the thing in the bedroom, and, you want to have a couple of babies. And then in the back of my head, too, what some of the blues, some of the blues singers that I listened to a couple people, Elmore James and what the hell is his other name saying? I want you to rock me till my back ain't got no bone. You know damn well what they were talking about. But anyway, he said you couldn't call it rock and roll, but he said, I'm going to call it rock and roll anyway. These DJs got in trouble with the IRS because Mitch Miller was a shit starter, and he was pissed off nobody was buying his records, and black music got popular, and it became a thing we called rock and roll. But anyway, what the reason why Dick Clark became the thing, and he was he become prevalent in it, right? And Alan Freed got his life ruined. Okay, Dick Clark, he admitted he was taking the payments under the table for people to play records, under the table. But he claimed it in his taxes for a gratuity. He did a smart thing to do. Basically, he was a good guy, and he was doing the good guy thing for the government, the kind of good guy that, I'm going to do what's right, claim things as gratuity under the table, and get my income tax back. So he claimed those payments under the table as a gratuity, so he was safe as far as the IRS was concerned. Alan Freed and God knows whoever else was playing records in that day, and like Jim Quinn quoted, and like I'm quoting, not to do him doing my talking for me, they didn't think it was wrong. I mean, they weren't evading taxes for government that they got in trouble, but the only reason that shit got all started because Mitch Miller was pissed off being repetitively because nobody wanted to buy his records and all that. So he started all that because nobody wanted to buy his records, and if it wasn't for that, but that's how that happened. These kids the yuppie kids that play their gangster music, the white kids in they know nothing about this, or they don't care about nothing. That's called old fogey music. Hey, I'm 50 years old, graying out, slightly blonde, should get a haircut. What do I know? But you know, I lived in back in the days, like, once again, National Record Mart record CDs. People were listening to Metallica, rock, Motley Crue, Bon Jovi, and then later you had harder music like Slayer. It wasn't really rock, and some stuff wasn't really rock and roll when you got into some really other underground music, you know what I mean? That's a whole bunch of whole stuff you can look up. Keep in mind, you can go and correct me on anything if you want to. Go ahead and correct me. I'm saying all this from memory and conglomerating in with part of my life story, like back in my day. People had records, 8-track tapes, and all that stuff, you know what I mean? But then again, some of you younger kids, you might be talking to your parents and might be agreeing with me in a way, you know. The only thing is, I mean, I'm saying all this stuff from memory. I know right away. You can go ahead, look some stuff up and correct me. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm not saying anything. I'm kind of giving you ballpark stuff here out of memory, which would be fun to look up. But anyway, that's what was going on. This was all the stuff that happened before you had Spotify, before you had iTunes, before you had your MP3s, MP3 players. And these times where people were on Pirate Bay and Napster and literally downloading music for free, literally at will. And record labels were getting pissed because they were losing revenue. But and people were doing that with movies too and everything else, and was very hard to put down. But as far to end this, as far as I'm concerned, the leftist white kids or any other BLM, the BLM suck-ups or whatever, just because of George Floyd, or even before 2020, before the George Floyd thing, all this white leftist bootlicking bullshit, and people, the Mr. Yuppie white kid, oh, everybody else is racist but me. My answer is lick the boots of every single person that's black in sight to show I'm not racist, and then point the finger and call everybody else racist. These kids don't know a goddamn thing. And they'll go and look at all this old music. Oh yeah, there a lot of old music. Miles Davis. Yeah, there's old, which I wish they would have kept the whole video up and make it accessible. Robert Herridge Theater, CBS, was taking it down. There's a part of it that still survives on YouTube, but it was a whole show. Miles, yeah, all their racism yet, civil rights movement, and according to the white yuppie kids, oh, everybody that don't suck up to their leftist crap is racist. And you try to say white people were so bad. Well, goddamn. Okay, look at Miles Davis. Back in the day, these were black and white footage. People like Miles Davis and Ahmad Jamal, leader of the band, especially Miles Davis. He is leader of band. The whole damn the big bands, and there was an era of big bands. Jim Quinn talked about the amusement tax, and the big bands were on their way out too. I'm talking in parentheses here. But back in those days, you had Miles Davis, the black guy, the leader of the band. Everybody else in the brass band is white guys, and he's the leader of the band. But yet white people were so damn bad, and yuppie kids that play gangster music in their cars. There's real loud, listen to gangster music. Yeah, those gangsters are fighting injustice. Yeah, handkerchief on their face, and there's a pistol in the air. And just like those black gentlemen that are on YouTube that were ex-prison inmates. They're telling you they did time in prison. They're being called Uncle Toms and sellouts. They said that gangster shit ain't really real. Those rap artists, they're not really gangsters. They live in fancy communities propped up by a whole bunch of money. And they can slip a bunch of people in the streets that are wannabe gang members to go and support their shit, but that gangster rap music video culture, it's all fake. If they come up with any real gangsters in Chicago with guns, they'd probably shit their damn pants, you know what I mean? But anyway, yeah, enough about that. But yeah, my case, not to ramble on about them, but these are the kind of white kids that they think they know it all. And if you were to, they don't give a shit about that kind of history at all that I talked about. How black people actually became successful. Even back in the days, yeah, even back in the days where black people didn't even have a right to vote yet. Some of them become the leader of the band. A bunch of white guys and a whole bunch of white guys in a brass band. Miles Davis was the leader of the band, god damn it, you know what I mean? Ahmad Jamal, who was from Pittsburgh. He was a native of Pittsburgh. Yes, I had his record too. You ever hear Ahmad's Blues? No, I guess maybe some of these leftist white kids, you don't give a shit about that. That's old fogey music. You probably are rooting for that Antifa kid that's smart, that almost got his ass kicked by a black gentleman. The Antifa kid that called a black guy an Uncle Tom piece of shit and almost got his ass kicked. Yeah, you're probably the kind of people that stick up for that Antifa kid, you know what I mean? That would be the mentality of some of these people. Yeah, you're black, you listen to old fogey music, and you probably don't like based non-woke YouTubers, the non-woke black YouTubers. You want to see them banned and scrubbed from the internet. And yeah, there's yeah, you ask any older black folk. Yeah, they'll talk about Ahmad Jamal, Barry White, the Ink Spots, the Temptations, a lot of the black groups. And oh yeah, the Jacksons when they were younger, unlike when the big scandals with Michael Jackson happened later were a damn shame. But everybody loved the Jackson 5, the young Jackson kids singing, they were huge. But it basically all stemmed from that story I told you, you know. Yes, there was black folk weren't really making it very big. There was racism, and they were paying DJs, slipping them some money to get their stuff played. And that story I said, you know, go look it up anyway. But and again, some of these, not just the leftist white kids, you got these older white folks too that are like woke suck-ups. They don't give a shit about that either. But yeah, anyway, yes, there was racism, but guess what? There were actually black people back in the day. They knew how to play instruments better than white people. Yes, they had instruments and they actually played them. They were real good at it too. Well, the bluesmen too. You had the original bluesmen, I could go on. You know, the groups like the Ink Spots, Temptations, they were a singer. They actually played instruments. Any of this shit, the gangster shit that these kids be playing in the car now, you don't see any black folk actually playing instruments like they did back in the day. That's just old fogey shit, right? That's just Uncle Tom shit, you know. Yeah, don't listen to any of them old black people and then go spouting the same thing, you know, when everybody fractures your ego. Racism this, racism that. You're not you didn't suck up to the protest marches in 2020, you racist. You're probably in with Aryan Nations and the Ku Klux Klan. Yeah, you can go fuck a goddamn porcupine with that damn shit. But anyway, that's the end of this video. I hope you learned something.